Hi, I'm Emily and welcome back to another week of News Bytes. This week's newsletter is on Acts chapter 4, verses 1 through 31, and it is called The Bad and the Bold. Let's get right into that. From Eliyahu, consider this. Coming into conflict with powerful people can be quite frightening for very good reasons. Many are the stories of those who have done so and had serious repercussions. Joseph comes to mind as one example. As a slave in Potiphar's house in ancient Egypt, Joseph had very little influence, while Potiphar was part of the elite of that day. Potiphar's wife shared in her husband's status, so when she made immoral advances towards Joseph, it put him in a very precarious situation, at no fault of his own. Joseph was appalled by the very suggestion of violating his master's wife, and said so, rebuffing her repeated advances. The corrupt woman always got her way and would not take no for an answer. She schemed to send everyone in the house except Joseph to do tasks elsewhere, leaving her alone with Joseph. Under cover of this secrecy, she made her demands as she grabbed hold of Joseph's coat. Just as quickly, he ran outside away from her, leaving his coat in her hands. On seeing she would not get her way with Joseph, her lust quickly turned to spite. She spun a tale, making her the innocent victim, while Joseph was portrayed as the evil cad that had attacked her. She had proof, his garment in her hand. Joseph had done the right thing, and now spent 12 years in prison for having done so. It could have been worse. He could have lost his life. In today's logic, some would reason that Joseph should have gone along to get along, and the sin would be on her. Joseph, though, was better than that, because he feared Elohim. Elohim knows how to make all things turn out for good for those who love and obey him. In Joseph's case, Elohim used the unfair trip to prison as a launching point for Joseph, eventually elevating him to the second highest position in Egypt. The moral of the story: fear God, not man. I would also add trust Yahweh. That should be a given. Joseph was put into a difficult situation but continued to trust Yahweh. A lot of believers now will be, or are already in, difficult situations, and maybe even terrifying situations. But these situations aren't to test Yahweh's love for you. You know he loves you. Trust in that. I would quote Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Continuing. In many ways, Joseph provides a prophetic picture of the then coming Messiah. Yeshua faced down the evil rulers of his day to bring truth and salvation to his people. While the occupying Romans and the self-serving Herodians were potentially dangerous to Messiah, nobody was more set against him than the corrupt religious establishment led by the high priest dynasty of the evil Annas and his relatives. They held the reins of religious power in ancient Judea, and they weren't about to give up the power, status, perks, and wealth that flowed to them from their oppressive religious regime. As the rightful Messiah, fulfilling over 450 prophetic qualifications, he was the rightful ruler of Israel who had come to save his people. He spoke the pure truth in righteousness with a divine authority commensurate with that reality. They should have embraced him and supported him as the King of Israel. Instead, they opposed him at every turn in their greedy obsession with holding on to their illegitimate power. For fear of the people, rather than just killing him, they tried to use numerous schemes followed by threats to dissuade him. When none of that worked, they concocted a scheme to get him killed at the hands of the Romans. And they thought they had won. And that would be the end of the problem. They figured his followers would be so frightened and discouraged that they would simply melt back into the population, and that would be the end of the story. Far from it, though. When Messiah rose from the dead, they were defeated. At that point, he was completely beyond their reach, and their impotent lies and schemes could do nothing to defeat him. As far as his followers were concerned, they were energized like never before, because some 500 of them had seen him and been with him after his resurrection. Rather than skulking away in fear, they emerged with a holy boldness that could never be stopped. The book of Acts continues that triumphant narrative of the Gospels, with the fight for truth, righteousness, and the kingdom of Messiah being pushed forward as a rapidly growing movement within Israel. Who should rule? The disciples were unequivocal. The resurrected Messiah is the rightful ruler of Israel. Thousands were joining them, and the evil Annas dynasty was losing their grip over awakening thousands. And I would add, if you want to hear more about the Annas dynasty, you can check out this meeting at Zion.net and even some recent past meetings, I believe. So, as we know, this struggle has continued now for centuries, all the way down to these last days. There's no doubt that evil worldly elites are pushing their agenda against Elohim and his Messiah Yeshua, putting themselves in the place of God. This will come to a head in the remaining few years before this generation is over. During this time, every person on earth will have to make a choice, decide with either the bad or the bold. Nothing could be more relevant to us right now than the book of Acts. And that's why I would encourage you to sign up at Zion.net as a partner and follow along with us with these meetings. And you can even become a student to participate in the book of Acts with us, to do a reading or some kind of skit or field example or even a presentation, it's like we're continuing Acts right now, and we need to be the bold. We need to speak the truth. We need to be that light in the world, especially right now with everything going on. If you've read the news, there's still the coronavirus. People are still afraid of that, of course, and there is the protest and the riots the riots are violent. That's the looting. There's a lot of darkness right now in the world, and it's our calling to be a light in the world and show forth the glory of God and bring and draw the people who are seeking righteousness and justice to Him, so that they can make that choice because they are aware. That's our duty, ultimately. But anyways, thank you for joining me for this newsletter. If you liked it, hit the like button, leave a comment. I really appreciate comments. And subscribe and hit the notification button so you will get the next video in Acts. I'll see you next week.